Bob planted a flag in the middle of the ocean. Found it. The map beneath his feet immediately expanded. His tiny search circle became a huge blue region. Bob stared at it. Then he moved the flag 2 inches. The circle got bigger. Okay, Bob said. The ocean is being difficult. But according to Bob, this should have been easy. A ship had definitely sunk here. The loss was documented. Someone had recorded its last known position, which meant the wreck should be sitting directly underneath that point, like a car parked in a driveway. Bob pointed at the map. Step 1, go to the location. Step 2, find ship. Step 3, become extremely famous. A countdown appeared beside the map. The salvage expedition was already searching. Bob had until the countdown ended to find the wreck first. He jumped into the reconstruction and dropped toward the seafloor. Down he went. The water became darker. The pressure increased. The seafloor finally appeared beneath him. Bob landed. He looked left. Nothing. Right. Nothing. Behind him. Still nothing. He checked the coordinates. Then he checked them again. The wreck wasn't there. Bob frowned. Then his face brightened. I know what happened. He pointed at the empty darkness. The wreck is hiding. His theory was simple. The ship must be directly below him, buried under the seabed. Bob looked around for something to dig with. He found an enormous imaginary shovel. He lifted it. Then stopped. No. He tossed it aside. This mystery is too sophisticated for shoveling. Instead, Bob jumped backward into the ship's final journey. The ocean transformed around him. A ship sailed across the surface. Then the weather changed. The wind strengthened. Waves crashed over the deck. The ship turned. Then turned again. Bob watched its path twist across the map. His little coordinates sat behind it. Bob's smile disappeared. The ship had been moving before it sank. And suddenly, that last reported position didn't look like an address anymore. It looked like a starting clue. The possible sinking area expanded. One point became a region. The region became enormous. Bob watched the storm push the ship farther. So that's the problem. He pointed at the expanding search zone. The coordinates aren't wrong. He paused. They're just not very helpful. The countdown continued. Bob chose the most likely section of the new search area. Fine. I'll search the area. He dove. This time, he found something. A piece of cargo. Then another. Then several more. Bob's eyes widened. Aha! He held up a piece of wreckage. I found the ship! He looked around. There was no ship. Just debris. Bob lowered the object. Okay. He looked at the debris. Then at the empty seafloor. I found the ship's stuff. The debris trail stretched away from him. Bob followed it. It crossed the seabed and slid down a slope. The terrain became rough. Cargo had collected between rocky ridges. Then one piece disappeared beneath the sediment. Bob stopped. He brushed the sediment away. Nothing. He cleared more. A curved piece of metal appeared. Bob froze. He brushed again. A section of hull emerged. There you are. For a moment, Bob thought he had won. Then he followed the hull. It ended suddenly. The ship was broken apart. One section had collapsed. Another had separated. Pieces were scattered across the seabed. Some were buried. Bob stared at the wreck. This isn't a ship. He looked at the scattered pieces. This is a ship after it has had a very bad day. The discovery changed everything. The wreck wasn't one giant object waiting to be spotted. It was a scattered physical puzzle. Bob had found evidence of the wreck without finding the whole wreck. And if one ship could become this difficult to recognize, how many others were hiding the same way? Bob rose above the seafloor. The map returned. His search area was now just a tiny patch. Bob zoomed out. The patch became smaller. He zoomed out again. It almost disappeared. Bob stared at the ocean. Then he had another idea. If searching one wreck is difficult, he grinned. I'll search everything. He entered a reconstruction of a deep ocean survey. A survey vessel crawled across the seafloor. A thin line appeared behind it. Bob waited. Another line appeared. Then another. He looked at the enormous darkness surrounding those lines. Huge spaces remained untouched. Bob frowned. That's the search? The vessel continued moving. Bob grabbed the survey route and stretched it. The lines multiplied. He made them move faster. The vessel raced across the ocean. Bob grinned. Problem solved. The map zoomed out. Massive blank areas remained. Bob stopped smiling. He had just discovered something uncomfortable. Searching the seafloor wasn't like looking across an empty parking lot. A survey could examine a specific area carefully. But the ocean was enormous. And the deeper the target, the harder the search could become. Bob looked at the tiny lines crossing the gigantic seafloor. Then he noticed something else. His original wreck had been unusually lucky. He had a known ship. A known general region. A final route. A storm to reconstruct. A debris field. A physical wreck. But what happened when those clues didn't exist? Bob jumped backward through other ship losses. One ship disappeared during a storm. Its final position was uncertain. Another vanished after a navigation error. Another sank with only a rough location. Another disappeared without anyone left behind who could say exactly where it went down. The map filled with circles. Some were small. Others were enormous. Bob pointed at one of the biggest. That's not a coordinate. He stared at it. That's a guess wearing a coordinate costume. The countdown kept ticking. Bob suddenly realized his original question had been backwards. He had been asking, why haven't we found every shipwreck? But some wrecks never begin as a precise point on a map. Some ships drift before sinking. Some disappear during storms. Some are recorded with uncertain positions. Some have incomplete historical records. And some may be lost without enough surviving information to tell searchers where to begin. Bob returned to his original wreck. This time, he didn't see one mystery. He saw a chain of clues. The ship's route narrowed the possibilities. The storm narrowed them further. The debris showed where material had ended up. The terrain explained how the wreck had scattered. The sediment explained why part of it was hidden. Each clue reduced the search area. Bob followed the chain again. He moved along the debris trail. Down the slope. Across the rocky seabed. Toward the buried structure. The countdown was almost finished. Bob reached the section he had exposed earlier. He cleared away more sediment. Nothing. He cleared again. Still nothing. The timer flashed. Bob looked at the remaining search area. There were dozens of places he could still search. He almost ran toward one. Then stopped. That would be guessing. He looked at the debris. Then the terrain. Then the ship's reconstructed route. The clues were pointing somewhere else. Bob changed direction. He followed the evidence instead of the map. He reached a depression in the seabed. Sediment covered something underneath. Bob cleared it away. A large section of hull emerged. Then another. The shape became unmistakable. Bob stared. The wreck. He had found it. The countdown stopped. Bob raised both arms. I did it! His imaginary trophy appeared above him. Every shipwreck. Bob smiled. Then he looked back at the ocean. His smile slowly disappeared. He had found one wreck because he had enough clues to shrink its hiding place. But what about wrecks with no accurate final position? What about wrecks scattered across the seafloor? What about wrecks buried under sediment? What about wrecks sitting thousands of meters deep? What about ships whose records simply don't tell us where they disappeared? Bob looked at the trophy again. Then at the ocean. Slowly he crossed out every shipwreck. And wrote one down. Bob nodded. Much more realistic. Then something moved beside his foot. Bob froze. A tiny unidentified object poked out of the sediment. He stared at it. The object disappeared again. Bob slowly crouched. The countdown was over. The wreck had been found. His job was finished. He looked at the camera. Then at the sediment. Then back at the camera. Okay. He reached toward it. Maybe one more. The camera pulled away. Bob became smaller. The wreck became smaller. His search area became smaller. And the ocean kept expanding. That was the real mystery. It isn't that humanity has failed to find every shipwreck because nobody has looked hard enough. The problem is that there is no complete map of every wreck waiting to be discovered. We don't know the exact location of every ship that sank. We don't always know the final position of ships that disappeared. And even when we know a wreck exists, it can be scattered, buried, damaged, hidden by terrain, or sitting in an enormous area that is extremely difficult to search. Finding a wreck is often a process of shrinking uncertainty. But for some wrecks, the uncertainty starts enormous. And for others, we may not even know where the uncertainty begins. Bob had started with a simple theory. If we know a ship sank, we should be able to find it. He had ended with a much stranger realization. Sometimes the hardest part isn't finding what's underwater. It's knowing where underwater begins.
That's it for this mystery. Subscribe for more adventures with Bob, and watch the next video on screen.